assigned time slot 0, he can transmit and listen just on that time slot. But as soon as that time is over, and we're talking thousandths of a second, as soon as that time slot's over, his channel is no longer used at all. And then the next time slot is used. He can talk or listen on the next time slot until that time slot is over. And then the next user can do that. And you can have multiple time slots. GSM divided the channels into very wide channels, 200 kilohertz of channels, but it was 8 time slots. So if you were assigned time slot 0 and 4.16 milliseconds, you had to stop. I mean, you kept on talking, but you didn't know the difference. And then time slot 1 came, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7, then it's your turn again, 8. Voice doesn't notice that at all. Things like data you can't transmit a lot of data. Data is much quicker, so it doesn't work real well with data. However, for voice, you don't know the difference. Time division multiplexing, that's what this is called. Time division multiplexing has been around since the early 1960s. In fact, in 1962 on landline circuits, it was already known how to do time division multiplexing. So it's a common telecom term, TDM. So that's another way you can increase capacity. Here you can increase capacity by just having cells. Remember we talked about you can reduce the size of the cell and then reuse those frequencies at a distance, as long as you don't overpower those cells. That's one way. Now you can increase it even more by having multiple people use that same frequency. So right here, if you have 3 time slots, you have 3 times. Instead of these 3 frequencies, you could have 9 people use these. If you had 8 time slots, you could have 24 people use these 3 frequencies. So you're dividing the air interface into time slots. That's TDMA. So GSM uses a combination of FDMA, frequency division multiple access, and TDMA. They have different frequencies, but different time within those frequencies. There is a third way that you can modulate the signal where more users can get on there, and that's called CDMA, code division multiple access. And like it says, that uses a unique code to differentiate users sharing the same frequency. Now everyone in the cell is using that same frequency, but they're assigned unique codes. There's an analogy to that. Suppose you were in this large room and everyone's talking to other people. There's 2 people talking to each other, and there's many people, and each talking to one other person. Each person has a different language. Some are speaking French, some are speaking Arabic, some are English, some are Portuguese. They're all different languages. You hear them all, but you don't listen. You only listen to the one that's your common language. So if you're speaking French, you only listen to that French, even though you're hearing Arabic and you're hearing Japanese, you're hearing all these other different languages. That's what CDMA does. Your mobile phone is listening to all this. It's kind of like almost a noise. It's listening to this noise, but it's filtering everything out except for its unique code. So those are the 3 ways that the signals can go on the air. You improve the air interface: frequency division multiple access, time division multiple access, and code division multiple access. Second generation systems used TDMA and CDMA. Those were the 2. Now, CDMA did not become commercially available until around 1995 or 1996. TDMA, time division multiple access, was commercially available in the early 90s. So initially, any system that was second generation in the 1990s it had to be TDMA. CDMA did not come out for several years after that. So when you look at second generation systems, let's just kind of look at the left-hand side of the slide. Let's kind of look at this end over here, kind of the left-hand part. There were many potential systems you had a system called, this is just an example of them. One is called PDC, Personal Digital Cellular. That was in Japan. Personal Handy Phone Service. That was also a Japanese standard. Telepoint. This was a little kind of an extension of cordless telephony in Europe. There were multiple paging services. There was a system in that was meant to be worldwide called Iridium. And Iridium, instead of having the cells on the Earth, the cells were up in the satellite. So you would stay still and the cell would go over you as the satellite traveled. It was a polar orbiting satellite. So the satellites were going over the polar coordinates. It's called Iridium because that's the atomic number. I think it's 76. There were going to be 76 of these satellites, which could cover the entire Earth all at once. They later changed that to 66 or 67, but they kept the name Iridium. It didn't go very far. The company's still around today, but it did not meet the expectations that they thought it once would. And there were other second generation systems. In the United States, they had one called, they called it digital AMPS. It was their analog system, which is the AMPS system, Advanced Mobile Phone Service, but they divided it into time slots, into 6 time slots. And then they called that North American TDMA. That was a digital. There was another one that did CDMA. They called themselves CDMA-1, but CDMA did not become commercially available, not until the mid-1990s. There was another second generation system that was called IDEN, Integrated Digital Enhanced Networks. Again, it was kind of a small market. Now, one of the things about all of these, they were really not compatible with each other. So if you had a TDMA phone in the United States and you traveled into an area that had CDMA, the phone didn't work because these technologies and the air interfaces and a lot of the communication in these that were not compatible. So you could not really roam. You had to stay in your area, or if you had a like technology somewhere else. So roaming was very difficult back then. Now, that's the left-hand side of the screen. However, let's take a look at this side of the screen. Just concentrate just on here. The European Telecom Standards Institute, ETSI developed a system that was very standardized. In other words, you had a mobile station which had a SIM card, a subscriber identity module inside of it. You had a standard radio interface, which was frequency division, multiple access, and time division, multiple access. That was a radio signal. You had a cell tower, which was called the base transceiver station. You had a common communication path back to the mobile switch. That was a standard communication. The way the mobile switch communicated with all of these other devices that are needed for mobility. These are registers, these are databases, these are message centers, things that make a mobile network work. All of those things were standardized. So in other words, if they were standard frequencies. So if you had a phone that you bought it up here in the United Kingdom and you traveled down here to France, or you traveled to Spain, or you traveled to Portugal, as long as there was a roaming agreement, your phone would work because it was a standard. Everything was standardized. It was the same. Whereas over here, these were all different. So the one that really became dominant in the world, started off in Europe, actually started off in the Nordic countries, then it went into Europe, and then the Middle East, Australia. The one that really dominated and roaming was really starting to take off in the 1990s, it was this system called GSM. This is the one that became the standard for the world. This had some users, but it was very difficult to roam. So when it came to second generation systems, you had multiple systems, but one that pretty much was dominating the world was the one that came out of Europe. That was called GSM, Global System for Mobile Communications. So the GSM system, again, we have a right side of the left side of the screen over here and the right side of the screen over here. Let's take a look at them again, right and left. Let's start with the left. This is what happened mostly in the United States, not only in the United States. There were some companies in India, there were some companies in Brazil, there were some other companies around the world, but mostly in the United States and Canada, they had all kinds of different systems. They kept their first generation system, which was called AMPS, Advanced Mobile Phone Service. And that was a frequency division multiple access system. They had another system that they, instead of a 30 kilohertz channel, they narrowed it down to a 10 kilohertz. Didn't work very well. That was called narrowband amps. They had a system that did time division multiple access. Then they had a second system that did time division multiple access. They had two different FDMA, TDMA systems. Then they had a CDMA system. In other words, different companies all had different air interface technologies, and none of them worked together. You had to have the same technology. You can't have one end listening to CDMA and then trying to talk on TDMA and listen on CDMA. It doesn't work that way. These have to be the same. The communication path between the radio tower, the cell tower, and the mobile switch itself, most of those were vendor proprietary. In other words, they weren't open standards. Whoever the vendor was of the cell tower had to talk to the same vendor for the mobile switch, whether that be Ericsson or Nokia or Lucent. There were different providers, but that was not an open standard. That was proprietary. The way all of these devices communicated with each other, that was standardized. It was something called ANSI-41. That was just the name of it. That's the communication that the switch talks to the home system and talks to the equipment register. We'll talk more about that when we look at SS7. But this was the common communication path. But if you look at just the left-hand side here, you had way too many non-compatible air interfaces. You had this was not standardized. This part was. Now let's take a look over here. What's standardized here? Everything. You have a standard SIM card, which goes into the mobile phone. The user identity is on that SIM card, that subscriber identity module, and that goes into the phone. Together, that's called the mobile equipment. You had a common radio frequency, which was time division multiple access and frequency division multiple access. You had different frequencies divided up into 8 time slots. These cell towers were called base transceiver stations. You had a common interface to a controller. You had a common communication path back to the switch. You had common signaling protocols that all these devices needed for a mobile to work. Was all the same. They were all talking the same language. In other words, from the beginning to the end, it was standardized. So if two companies, one in Sweden and one in Germany, signed a roaming agreement, you could take your phone from Sweden and go to Germany, turn it on, and it worked because it was a standard. The radio was the same, the communication paths were the same. So the standardization really enhanced roaming, and roaming was very, very easy if you had a GSM mobile phone. Roaming was very, very difficult in other parts of the world. Here in the United States, it was very difficult. If I had a CDMA mobile phone, it wouldn't work if I went to a TDMA system. If I had any of these and flew over to Europe, nothing would work. In the 1990s, if you had a phone in the United States, any technology in the United States, and you got on a plane and flew to Europe, it wouldn't work. If I had a European phone, I could go all over Europe and it would work. So again, the standardization of like systems makes sense. Think of what you do with things like coding. It has to be a standard. It has to be the same. Otherwise, it works in one area, it doesn't work in another area. Same thing with standards with mobile telecommunications. So that was the biggest thing with standardization, and this came about with second generation mobile phones. So this is the one that predominated. This is the one that was predominant and it really was taken over. And this slowly, in North America and other parts of the world, these slowly went out. They stayed on through third generation. By the late 2000s, 2006, 2007, there were very few second and even third generation systems that were not GSM based. So what makes up a GSM network? What makes up what are the piece parts of a GSM network? Well, like you said, there's always three parts to every mobile system. I don't care if you're second generation, third generation, fourth generation, fifth, sixth, any generation, there are three main parts. You have your user equipment, that's out here. You have your cell towers and your controllers, that's part of the RAN right here. And then the last piece is always what's known as the core network. The core network is this. It's made up of your switches, telephone switches, which interpret digits, and it also made up of various databases and registers. Remember, you need a lot to keep track of you. If you have a landline phone, it doesn't have to keep track of you. It's in your house, or it's in your building, or it's in your office. It's there. You can't take that phone and walk outside. It doesn't work that way. But on a mobile phone, you can be anywhere in the world. As long as there's roaming agreements and technology, you can be anywhere in the world. So it takes a lot of databases, and it takes a lot of registers to keep track of you, basically. So these are the piece parts. These are the parts of a mobile network, a GSM mobile network. We'll concentrate on GSM since that's the system that is used in the world. Now, just some things about GSM. It was first deployed in December of 1991 in Finland. I forget it was first in Finland, 1991. Well, then in 1993, it was deployed in the United Kingdom. And by far the most popular second generation technology. And remember, there were a lot of second generation technologies. This was by far the most common one. It was designed for voice, though. There was back in the 1990s, there was very little data. Then by the mid 1990s, some data was coming in here. We'll talk about that later. But it was small amounts of data. It was like reading maybe a document or reading an email. That was about it. There was no picture sharing, certainly no video. The technology just wasn't there. There's also a new thing called short message service, where instead of me picking up the phone and calling you, I could text out a message. That was never designed to be as popular as it turned out to be, but it was part of that second generation system. Very little data. So the actual mobile part here, the three major parts, the mobile user equipment, the RAN, and the core network. The user equipment is made up of a mobile equipment and a SIM card, your subscriber identity module. Now, the subscriber identity module is you. The hardware, the actual phone itself, is just a piece of hardware. Your identity, your credentials, your authentication, your home message center, your home network is all contained in your subscriber identity module, your SIM card. That can be changed from phone to phone. The radio towers were called BTSs, base transceiver stations, and they would control the different radio frequencies on these cells. So that was the BTS. The base transceiver station would communicate. Several of these base transceiver stations, there would be multiple cell towers like these, which would communicate with a central controller. That central controller would then send the message back to the mobile switch. So when you powered your mobile phone on, out comes your identity. Your identity is picked up by the cell tower. The cell tower gives your identity to the base station controller, and the base station controller goes to the mobile switch. And the mobile switch is connected to other networks. It's connected to what are called PSTN. That's the wireline network. It's called the public switched telephone network. That's the wireline network. And it's connected to other wireline networks. It's also connected to other mobile network operators. So you have these voice pads, it's called trunks. These trunks that connect so you can talk on the phone to people in other networks. But internal to the mobile network itself, you have various databases. You have what's known as a visitor location register, the VLR, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. That keeps track of all the mobiles that are out here that are assigned to that telephone switch. You have a home location register, which is think of this like a central database of all of your services. Every one of you that has a mobile phone has some services. You might have some restrictions maybe on mobile calls. You might have maybe restrictions on short message service. You might have call forwarding as one of your services, call waiting. You have various services. So the home location register keeps track of all of your services. And when a visited system wants a copy of your information, the visited register here, the visitor location register, will ask the home location register, "Hey, give me some information," and it does that with communication. There's also something called the Authentication Center, the AUC. The Authentication Center has your authentication credentials. Sometimes or occasionally you'll use your phone, not maybe every time, but you use your phone, you want to place a call. The system wants to make sure that's really you using this, so it'll authenticate the mobile. You don't know this as you're going on. It happens very quickly. It's saying, prove to me who you are. It's like if you're on the phone and someone says, well, what's your mother's maiden name or something like that, you're doing an authentication. Well, same thing here. The system will authenticate the phone to make sure you really are who you are. There's the equipment identity register, which keeps track of hardware, lost hardware, or stolen hardware. And you have a message center. The message center is a store and forward device for mobile originated short messages. So if you send out a short message, you tap out a short message, as soon as you hit the send key, that short message goes to your system's message center. Your system's message center then stops everything. And it has to go find the recipient, find who you're sending the message to. Where in the world are they? It's somewhere in the world. Once it finds where you are, the recipient is located, it then sends that short message. So it's a store and forward device in your home network. All of these devices, the mobile switch, these different registers, these different databases, the message center, all of these talk to each other. And they talk to each other over a common type of data. And that common type of data is SS7, Signaling System 7. That's the standard. That's the telecommunications standard. And the application that uses SS7 is called GSM Map, Mobile Application Part. The GSM Map application. So that's GSM, and that's kind of a high-level look at GSM. We're going to look in more detail how it works and how it works for non-roaming and how it works for roaming. We'll do that on next Wednesday. We'll pick it up right here. Any questions?
Okay. So one thing I noted was the CDMA.
Mm-hmm.
With the CDMA, is it better than the other two, the FDMA and the TDMA?
Mm-hmm.
Is it more better than?
Yes. Yeah. CDMA turns out that this for data is much better for data. So this really became the predominant air interface for all 3G phones. Second generation used these two. First generation was strictly this. Second generation was these two and a little bit of this. Third generation used this exclusively.
Okay.
And it's even onward from there. Fourth generation and so on. It uses those technologies. CDMA is much better for data than TDMA ever is. That's true.
Okay. Jeff, do you want to
Any others?
We can't hear you.
Then I wanted to also find out if 4 and 5G also use the same access methods.
I didn't understand that.
Can you
We can
repeat?
either text that, or I can put the text window open. Either text that, or if you could repeat that, Raphael.
Yeah,
Ralph,
Jeff, yeah, repeat it
yeah,
again.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm saying, when you asked the question, I wanted to find out if the fourth and the fifth generation are also using the same
CDMA.
multiple access methods.
Okay, so I believe his question was if the fourth and the fifth generation, are they also using the CDMA?
Yeah, third generation, you mean 3G?
No, 4 and 5.
4 and 5.
Yeah, there's 2G and 2.5G. 2G and 2.5G both used TDMA. So TDMA was used in both of these networks. This was used, and what happens is in 2.5G networks, it was called packet switching. We'll talk about that next week. We'll talk about that next Wednesday. What packet switching does is it takes multiple time slots all at once while you're downloading your information. And as soon as your page is downloaded, it gives those spare time slots, gives it back to the system. That was called packet switching.
Okay.
And that introduced a couple of new pieces of architecture. That's here. We'll talk about that next week, right? But up right here, GPRS, that's packet. That came about in second generation also.
Okay, but he wanted to know about the fourth and the fifth generation. Which ones they use?
I'm sorry, which ones? Which ones?
The fourth, and then the fifth.
Oh, the fourth generation. Fourth generation was still. These are still forms of CDMA, but they're synchronous.
Okay.
There's synchronous CDMA. We'll talk about those when we look at fourth generation, but it still is based on the CDMA technology. It's just more of a synchronous, but it's still based on that same CDMA technology.
Okay.
And we will talk more about those.
Yes, and to share a little light about the CDMA, I want to understand the mechanism it uses. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we'll take a look a little deeper into CDMA and how it works and what it does. Like I said, we're not going to get into radio technology or radio RF engineering, but we'll at least understand what the different technologies are in each generation.
Okay.
Absolutely. We'll do.
Very well. We are really glad for having you this night as well. Thank you. That was very awesome.
Okay, very good. Let me move you over to here now. There we go. Let's see. I can get rid of this right here.
Yes.
Move you up here. Move you here, and oops, I gotta stop sharing this. Otherwise, you get infinity. There we go. That's better.
Yes. Okay. So.
Oh, we got some strange-looking people here. I see, huh?
Yeah. So that is Rahim.
Yeah.
Rahim, can we see your face? Can we see your real face?
Well, have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your class, and we'll see you on Wednesday. And let me know if you have any questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.